Hi, I'm Kira. This is Theo. And what? I don't know what happened. You went to password. Okay. Well, hopefully okay. So we are working in Becca Barnes' group in the UV department on a project looking at the effects of wildfire on carbon cycling in the Colorado Red Range. So as you all probably know, global temperatures have been increasing over the past century due to elevated levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And that trend is expected to increase into the next century. So in order to be able to understand and make predictions about climate change, we need to understand the global carbon cycle. And one important piece of that puzzle is forests. Forests cover 4.17 megahectares and contain 1,240 petagrams of carbon in biomass globally. So forests represent a really important carbon sink on the global scale. However, disturbance, especially wildfire, is a really important regulator of these ecosystems, especially in terms of carbon fluxes. And Thea's going to tell you more about that.
Okay, so wildfires are a really important regulator in forest ecosystems. Each year, fires affect 383 hectares, or megahectares, that should be megahectares per year, releasing 2,078 teragrams of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So naturally, fires should be affecting forest ecosystems every 15 to 20 years, especially in the Colorado Front Range. But in the advent of human intervention in fire suppression in Smokey the Bear, we are experiencing an increase in size and severity of forest fires, and that is could potentially change carbon cycling and the role that forests have as a sink in the long term.
Yeah, so we have this nice little diagram here that shows that on the local scale, forests, especially like ponderosa pine forests, will have low severity burns every 15 to 20 years, as Theo said. And that releases a lot of carbon, but that carbon is generally resequestered during post-fire recovery and regrowth. So over the long term, these local forests are considered to be net neutral in terms of carbon, but these high severity, more frequent fires might potentially impact that balance.
So here is a figure from a study that was published in 2006, and it's basically showing the link between spring and summer temperatures, which have been increasing in the last 20 years, and wildfire frequency. So as you can see, they're linked and increasing almost together. And the study also looked at spring snowmelt and fire seasonally.
So this just kind of shows that as the climate continues to warm, we're expecting that wildfire severity and frequency will continue to increase.
So here we have one of our sites. This is Painted Rocks, and as you can see, we've got a nice healthy stand of ponderosa pine trees, and we have a good layer of organic matter on the forest ground. Here we have a picture of one of our sites, our burned sites, which is Waldo Canyon and Hayman, excuse me. And so, as you can see, this is the effect of a high severity crown fire, which is pretty much kills the whole tree and then decimates the organic layer on top of the soil. So as you can see, these are just kind of gives you an illustration of kind of some of the changes that we're looking at in the terrestrial ecosystem.
And just for a little context, the Hayman Fire was in 2002, and you can see that there's almost no regrowth of trees. There's a little bit of like shrubs and ground cover, but it's pretty drastic, the amount to which the fire decimated the ecosystem. So our main question that we're looking at here is, how does high intensity fire affect carbon cycling in ponderosa pine, Douglas fir forests in the Colorado Rockies? And specifically, we're looking not only at the total amount of carbon in these watersheds, but also what forms that carbon is in, how it's transported, and how it affects the streams that drain from these watersheds. So we have 8 study sites, 3 in the Hayman Fire burn, 3 in the Waldo Canyon burn, and 2 control sites. And at each of these sites, we're doing stream sampling every week. And at 4 of the sites, we're doing our terrestrial portion of the study. So we set up plots on the slope that lead down to the river, and are taking soil samples and doing an inventory of carbon. So obviously there's a lot of pieces to this question. Sort of one of the big ones is the total carbon. So we're looking at how fire affects the total amount of carbon in each of these watersheds. So that includes looking at not only soil carbon, but also above ground biomass and litter on the ground. So in these terrestrial plots that we've set up at the 4 sites, we're looking at dead standing trees, live standing trees, ground cover, horsewoody tree, and then soil carbon. And we're going to compare between burned and unburned sites, and also along slopes.
We're looking at inventory of carbon, right? The other thing we are interested in is the quality of the carbon. And when I say quality, I mean the ability for microbes to break down the carbon as a nutrient source. So black carbon, which is a thermally reduced form of carbon, also known as charcoal, is not bioavailable to microbes. So it essentially is being removed from the carbon flux and becoming a sink, which is, so we're interested in kind of like how does black carbon compare in burned and unburned sites in just concentration, and so that's going to tell us a little bit about carbon cycling in that area.
Yeah, so sort of my main focus in this project is looking at bioavailability of soil carbon, as Theo mentioned, which basically means that there's different forms of carbon, and based on the molecular structure, some forms are more readily broken down by microbes and released into the air as carbon dioxide than others. So some forms of carbon will be stable in the soil for long periods of time, such as black carbon, but also different forms of organic carbon. So what I'm doing is taking soil samples and incubating them over time to measure soil respiration, to see how fast the organic carbon in the soil is being broken down, to sort of get an idea of how fire affects the quality of the carbon in the soil, and how that might affect long-term carbon budgets.
So in addition to looking at soil respiration, we're also interested in the lateral flux of carbon from terrestrial ecosystems to the aquatic ecosystem. So as you can probably predict, with less trees and more, we're going to be getting more detritus, more organic carbon maybe going into the rivers. And so we're interested in the concentration of organic and inorganic and carbon and nitrogen in these streams, and so we're sampling them weekly to see if those vary.
So actually, it's really interesting. Recent studies have found that rivers can act as a source of carbon as organic matter is broken down, and so we want to see how fire in terrestrial ecosystems affects that flux of carbon from streams.
And then in addition to looking at organics and inorganics, we are also interested in kind of assessing the stream ecosystem health. So the way we're going to do that is hopefully get measurements on diversity and abundance of macroinvertebrates in the streams, and hopefully be able to kind of assess those depending on how they vary in burned and unburned sites. And then maybe get a reading of the rate of decomposition, which is, of course, these animals are very important shredders of leaf matter and leaf litter and detritus in the river. So we're interested in kind of how their presence can change the rate of decomposition in the river. And then here's just kind of a summary of the methods, the different environmental variables that we're considering in the water analysis. So we're getting discharge measurements, pH, conductivity, and all those normal ones. And then we're getting ammonium and dissolved organic carbon and aromaticity to understand the quality of the carbon. How many
So just a quick overview of the methods for analyzing for the soil. I'm doing incubations to look at soil respiration. We're also inventorying like coarse fraction charcoal and doing digestions on the fine fraction soil to estimate the total black carbon content of the soil. We'll also be doing elemental analysis to look at the nutrient ratios in the organic matter in the soil and some extractions to estimate how leaching works in these soils. And for vegetation in our terrestrial plots, we're using allometric equations to estimate the total carbon in standing trees. And we're doing transects in each plot to look at coarse woody debris and charcoal, and we're estimating ground cover and also analyzing those for carbon content and nutrient ratios. So this is the first year that we're doing this research. So right now it's very much question driven. We're trying to get as much information as possible so that we can refine hypotheses and come back in later years and maybe do more sites and look at more things more specifically. But yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Yes.
How long does it typically take for a forest to regenerate after a severe burn versus a not as severe burn?
Well, a severe burn will take, I think for the Hayman Fire, it's been estimated something like 150 years, but I'm not totally sure on that. Don't quote me. I don't know. More specifically?
Yeah, that's about.
Yeah, but for like a low severity fire that doesn't kill the trees themselves, regrowth is pretty fast. I mean, in a natural ponderosa pine forest, fires will occur every 15 to 20 years, so regrowth is